The problem is the people hear what I say, they read this, they go to the oncology, and the oncology guy says, I never heard of this. It can't be any good. It must be quackery. But what he's doing is quackery. So, and he doesn't know it, but it's true. When you see bald-headed people who have been treated for cancer, you're trying to kill cancer cells. Why the hell are you going bald? Metabolic therapy kills cancer cells and keeps your hair. So this tells you right off the bat, when you see people that are brutalized by a system, they're being treated by people who don't know the biology and biochemistry of what they're doing. And that's because of the establishment. The system itself thinks cancer is a genetic disease, so you're not training these people to think that it's a metabolic problem.
Professor Thomas Seyfried, welcome to the program.
No, well, thank you very much, Anders. It's very nice to be here today. Thank you.
Well, I am thrilled to have you on, and I'm sure that many listeners are familiar with your work, and those who aren't, they will soon be. We did talk not so long ago in connection with another project that I'm involved with, and it's so fascinating to hear about your research and what you've come to and what you've found, and about the frustrating resistance from mainstream medicine. So, if I should just begin to kind of explain what it is that you have been researching on, in a nutshell, what we eat largely determines our health, correct?
Well, certainly, it's not only what we eat; it's the way we act, our exercise levels, and the whole diet and lifestyle issue is putting us Western people at risk for chronic disease. Cancer being the number one in my mind, the most feared, the most traumatic, and the most disturbing to people, I think, is cancer. I know you can get type 2 diabetes and cardiovascular disease and obesity and high blood pressure and hypertension and these kinds of things. But in my mind, I think cancer is the number one frightening disorder of Western societies, for sure.
And perhaps also the most controversial disease to connect with metabolism, with what we eat in our lifestyle.
Well, only for those that don't understand the biology.
Yeah.
When you understand the biology, it's a remarkably simple disorder. You really have to work hard to get your body to get cancer. It's not easy to get cancer. Our Paleolithic ancestors and those that live according to traditional ways rarely have cancer. Animals in the wild that live according to their traditional ways rarely have cancer. When we look back for a Paleolithic or people that are living according to traditional ways, and animals, what kills animals and people in natural ways is injuries and infections. Before we had orthopedic surgeons and antibiotics, our members of our species died from injuries that were not repaired, and various infections from bacteria and maybe viruses and things like this. But now we have orthopedic surgeons and we have antibiotics and we have these kinds of things, which allows us to live longer and not die from the things that killed us before civilization. But now what's killing us is civilization itself is responsible for the demise of people, whether it's dementia, cancer, cardiovascular disease, diabetes. All these kinds of things are the result of our technological improvement in food production and the ease of our lifestyle. We don't exercise nearly as much as we did. We're under stress. We have poor sleep. We have foods that are largely produced in mass rather than locally grown. And all these things impact us, and cancer arises, and many of these other chronic diseases arise from an impact on the efficiency of oxidative phosphorylation, which is the ability of our bodies to generate energy by breathing oxygen. So we become less and less capable of using oxygen chronically, which then sends the body off, either kills cells or it can allow the cells to gradually compensate using ancient non-oxygenated pathways like fermentation, which was the way all of the cells that evolved on this planet originated, using ferment energy without oxygen, because there was no oxygen in the atmosphere at that time in the early history of our Earth. But yet we had living organisms that generated energy through what we call fermentation, substrate level phosphorylation to be specific. And cancer cells are simply falling back on these ancient pathways, because the organelle that is supposed to keep our cells healthy and quiescent is now become chronically corrupted. And the cells fall back on a fermentation pathway, which leads to dysregulated cell growth, because the organelle that controls the differentiated state is corrupted and no longer able to maintain a growth control. So the cancer is cell division out of control due to an inefficiency of oxidative phosphorylation, leading to a compensatory substrate level phosphorylation, which is the default state of cells. Proliferation is the default state, as well as substrate level phosphorylation is the default energy state. So it's completely explainable.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
not complicated at all.
No, let's dive a little bit deeper into the mechanisms in a bit here, and maybe so that as little technical as possible. But anyway, we're told that cancer is a genetic disease. Everybody says that. We're told that. It says in textbooks, but you say it's not. Can you explain why is everybody else wrong?
The reason why everybody says it's a genetic disease is confirmation bias. Because everybody says it, everybody else has to say it. It's called dogmatic ideology. It's been hammered into everybody's brain that cancer is a genetic disease. It must be. Because the National Cancer Institute in the United States, which spends more money on cancer than any other country in the world, says right on their website, cancer is a genetic disease.
Yeah.
Cancer is caused by mutations that lead to dysregulated cell growth. Nothing could be further from the truth. These people just don't understand the biology of what they're talking about. I mean, after a while, you say, who are these guys that write this stuff? Don't they read the scientific literature? So, but why they say that? Yes, there's a lot of cancers that have mutations, and they thought that in the nucleus, the many cancers have, but there are some cancers that have no mutations, and nobody ever tries to explain that. We didn't. There's always some half-assed explanation for why some cancers have no mutations. Yes, there's not many of them, but they have been documented in many different scientific publications, and I have pulled them out. And I was always surprised why the authors never discussed the cancers that have no mutations when they're telling us that cancer is a genetic disease. So that was always found that to be a little strange. It's always like, we didn't do enough deep sequencing. We didn't do this. We didn't do that. Well, you did. Well, you found mutations in hundreds of other cancers using the same strategy, and all of a sudden you don't see it in this one cancer. That's an outlier, different. What do you mean an outlier? It argues that your hypothesis might not be correct.
There shouldn't be any outliers if the theory is correct.
There shouldn't be any. We have never found a tumor that has normal oxidative phosphorylation. Now, people say, that's not true because cancer cells consume oxygen like normal cells. Yes, they do, but that oxygen consumption in cancer cells is linked to reactive oxygen species, not energy production. ROS are carcinogenic and mutagenic. So a lot of the genetic damage we see in the nucleus of tumor cells are downstream effects of the abnormal respiration in the mitochondria. So we can explain a lot of this. Now we're finding, we just have a paper we're ready to publish, showing that all the major germline mutations that are linked to cancer, they're syndromes. You got Li-Fraumeni syndrome, the Lynch syndrome. You have of these various inherited risk factors. Every one of them damages the oxidative phosphorylation. So they are genetic mutations. They say, see, they're the cause. No. They none of them are 100% penetrant. So they cause cancer only only if they damage the ability of the cell to generate energy through oxidative phosphorylation. If they don't do that, you don't get cancer, even if the mutation is present. So people have to realize that as well. So you have somatic mutations, which are wear and tear on cells that you get over time, and then you have germline mutations. And we have shown that basically most of the somatic mutations are downstream effects of dysfunctional oxidative phosphorylation. And the germline mutations cause cancer only if they damage oxidative phosphorylation, which means that the damage to oxidative phosphorylation or the inefficiency of OXPHOS coupled to substrate level phosphorylation, which is fermentation, is the origin of cancer. So we put it all together, and we now know that when cancer cells grow, they need fermentation. And what drives the fermentation is the sugar glucose. And now we have published a paper just recently showing amino acid fermentation, and that the amino acid glutamine can be fermented, generate energy without oxygen. So we have an amino acid and a glucose that are the two drivers of dysregulated cell growth. Cancer cells cannot grow without those two fuels. If you cut down glucose and target glutamine, you will kill cancer cells. And you do it with exercise, which further lowers glutamine and glucose. And you use drugs and procedures to manage cancer. It is not a complicated disease. We have made it an incredibly complicated disease by focusing on downstream epiphenomena that are effects rather than causes. So that's why,
and we're using like wrecking balls when we could use scalpels or something like that.
Oh yeah, but the hardest part is trying to convince people that their diet and lifestyle are putting them at risk for not only getting cancer, but preventing the management of it once you get it. So we know we can manage cancer by targeting the two fuels driving the dysregulated cell growth. I guess one of the hardest parts is not the mechanisms of origin or prevention or any of this stuff, is getting people who are living in our society to change their behavior. I think that might be the most difficult thing. Going back to have to exercise every day. I can't eat highly processed carbs. I have to eat only foods that are going to enhance oxidative phosphorylation or restrict the ability of the tumor cell. I mean, all this is possible. All of this can be done. The problem is educating people to know what to do and how to do it. And I think there are a lot of people who would love to have that information and take charge of their own destiny to a large extent. But we think that going and running off to a top oncology center is the way to go, and they must know what they're talking about. And what I find in the cancer field is neither the patient nor the caregiver know what's going on. And in the United States, we have 1,700 people a day dying from cancer. That's 70 an hour. And those who do survive are brutalized by a system that poisons and irradiates them, surgically mutilates them, all because people think cancer is a genetic disease, and the oncology community must know what they're doing. And so we have oncologists that lack knowledge on the biology, and we have the poor patients that don't understand it. So we just have a lot of confusion and misunderstanding and ignorance that is responsible for this catastrophic problem.
So would you say that it's a completely preventable disease, or is it partly preventable, or
I would say it's largely preventable. Even Otto Warburg said that it could prevent 80%.
Yeah, he discovered this mechanism back in the 1920s or something.
Yeah, well, he was the one who originally said that cancers depend on fermentation for growth, which is true. It's just that the field distorted his work and ignored it and messed around with it. We've tried to clear it all up, show where he was correct and where he was incorrect. But when the field is chasing genes, mindlessly chasing genes, you're not going to get any major progress in managing cancer. Even the immunotherapies, which emerged from the somatic mutation theory, which is the theory that basically underlies the origin and development of therapies. I mean, some people can get help from that. Some people can get help from irradiation. Some people can get help from poisonous chemicals. The problem is it's not dropping the death rate as dramatically as it should be dropped. If we went to do metabolic therapy, ketogenic metabolic therapy will drop the death rate massively. Okay, I can tell you that right now. But people say, well, and then they come out and say, well, ketogenic diet's going to give you a heart attack. I said, what are you, stupid? You don't do that. You know, it's like, oh, well, he says we have to sit in front of a pot of lard and eat lard all day long. You know, these guys have 3 functional brain cells, you know, who say stupid things like this. And after a while, you say, don't these people understand the scientific literature? Do they ever go out of their way and look at what is really underlying these things? And the answer is no. So you get like 2 or 3 guys that think they talk the talk, they think they know what they're talking about, and they influence a large number of people to do stupid things. And because it's not easy sometimes to go and do the dives like we do. We go down into the guts of the problem, and we look at the mechanistic actions of what's happening. And then we try to explain it to the world, and you run into some problems. But it's going to happen. I can tell you right now, in the next, by the end of this century, we will be managing cancer very, very effectively.
Wow, that sounds fantastic. So let's back up a little bit before we continue with the details around what causes this and how we can prevent it and everything. But so how did you discover these connections between metabolism and cancer, metabolism and chronic diseases? I mean, were you also into this gene craze that was the craze around the genetic causes that was so prevalent in the 90s, or how did you discover all this?
Well, I have a PhD in genetics and biochemistry from the University of Illinois, and a master's degree in genetics from Illinois State University, and I was just as indoctrinated as the rest of them. I didn't think much about it when all these experts supposedly said cancer is a genetic disease, because I wasn't studying it. I wasn't studying cancer. I just assumed these guys knew what the hell they were talking about, because they were very prominent scientists, you know, members of the National Academy of Sciences, Nobel Prize winners, these kinds of guys. I felt they must know something. Why would you challenge these guys? They're well-respected scientists. And so I said, yeah, cancer is a genetic disease caused by all these mutations, just like everybody else did. But I didn't realize until I started doing the research myself how wrong that was. Because I worked in the field of epilepsy for many, many years, and I was mapping genes for causing epileptic seizures in mice that have natural forms of epilepsy. And then we were using, they were using diet. Ketogenic diet was known to manage epileptic seizures since the 1920s by Wilder at Mayo Clinic. And the mechanism wasn't known, how diet could reduce epileptic seizures, but I instead of mapping all these genes, I said, why don't we use a metabolic approach to manage seizures? Because it seemed to cut across all different kinds of epilepsies, whether it was focal motor seizures, grand mal seizures, you know, all these different classifications of epileptic seizures that the medical profession had provided for us. You go on a calorie restricted ketogenic diet, whatever kind of seizure you had seemed to go down. So I said, wow, what's the mechanism by which how does that work? Right. So we found that it was calorie restriction, and which goes back to fasting. It was like, wow. And it was linked to blood sugar. The lower the sugar, the more the seizures would go down. And it was managing these. But we had a parallel project on cancer, but it was related to angiogenesis, which is the abnormal vascularization of the tumor. The tumors become vascularized by poorly developed blood vessels. And people were saying that if you target these blood vessels with antibodies like Avastin and some of these other kinds of things, bevacizumab, they were making antibodies to vascular endothelial growth factors that would make these abnormal blood vessels. We had a grant because I was studying glycolipids, which are gangliosides, and we were finding that calorie restriction was changing the vascularization and the glycolipid patterns. And I was saying, wow, that's interesting. And then we were doing calorie restriction blocks epileptic seizures. So what happens when you do calorie restriction on cancer? And it was shrinking the cancer. And I didn't know until then. I said, then they said, oh, this might be related to what Otto Warburg said many years ago. Because Warburg was saying glucose drives the dysregulated growth. Well, if you do calorie restriction and fasting, you restrict glucose, and all of these things go down. Not only the angiogenesis, all of the inflammation goes down. The cancer cells start to die through apoptotic mechanisms. I said, wow, this is really interesting. So we had two parallel projects at the same time, managing epileptic seizures with ketogenic metabolic therapy, and then we were managing cancer with ketogenic metabolic therapy. But it didn't occur to me. I just started to support what Otto Warburg said. And then I said, why did they throw him under the bus? Why was he discounted as someone who really understood what was going on? And many people call it the Warburg effect. So they know that there's some linkage to glycolysis, which is energy without, it's actually aerobic fermentation, which is the continual production of energy through a fermentation mechanism, even in the presence of oxygen, which is, people get into the Warburg effect. And we realized that was causing a lot of confusion. We're changing that as we talk now. But I said, oh yeah, but then they said, oh, but tumor cells, if you take away all their glucose, they can still live. And glutamine was the fuel. And I said, well, how is glutamine fueling these tumor cells if they're growing without oxygen? Because you can't, if glutamine is being used as a fuel for oxygen, and these cancer cells can grow without oxygen, and they also can grow in cyanide, which is killed. Anybody will know how fast cyanide can kill you. But the cancer cell can live in cyanide and it can live in without oxygen. So I said, glutamine cannot be delivering energy to cancer cells through an oxidative process. So we started to design a novel design of experiments in my lab where we were taking away all the glucose and oxygen and growing them in cyanide, and then still getting energy from glutamine. Glutamine was still producing energy in the absence of oxygen and in the absence of glucose. And then we found out that damn things are being fermented. They're throwing out a waste product called succinic acid. Just like sugar, when you ferment it, throws out lactic acid. And that's what Warburg was saying. They're throwing out large amounts of lactic acid because they can't respire the pyruvate, so they're dumping it as lactate. Well, we find out they can't respire glutamine, and they're dumping it out as succinic acid. So you put this two together, and you got two powerful fermentation pathways driving dysregulated cell growth. One is the glucose pathway, and one is the glutaminolysis glutamine pathway. Both can operate in the absence of oxygen, and they feed off of each other, leading to this powerful dysregulated cell growth. So now you can come in and you can target glucose with diets, and you can target glutamine with drugs. So diet-drug combinations will destroy and stop these cancer cells, while at the same time enhancing the health and vitality, because we're transitioning the body to nutritional ketosis, and all of our normal cells can burn ketones, brain especially, muscles, heart. Only red blood cells can't, but they only need a tiny amount of glucose. So we've been able to figure out, and we can use normal cells to further restrict glucose in tumor cells. And we play normal body organs and cells off bad cells. It's an unbelievable way to do this. There's so many ways we can kill and manage cancer without toxicity. It's unbelievable.
I understand that your method here, or your therapy, ketogenic metabolic therapy, is it involves dual pathway here, as you said. To do away with the glucose, it's a dietary therapy, but to do away with the glutamine, you have to, because glutamine is an essential amino acid, and you can't just take it away from the body because the body needs it. So you have this thing called the press pulse. Can you explain how this works?
Well, this came to me from reading Ahrens and West. They were paleobiologists, and they were trying to figure out what was responsible for massive extinctions of organisms on the planet over our historical period. And it was very interesting. So they said massive extinctions of organisms. And in Earth's history, we have had these massive extinctions. But there was always two things that happened. There was always a chronic stress on populations, which weeded out kind of the weak ones and left the strong ones to survive. And then there was this catastrophic pulse, like a series of massive numbers of volcanoes or a meteor strike or something. So it was a change in Earth's climate together with a pulse and that would exterminate everybody. Nobody, and if you had the pulse without the stress, you would exterminate a lot, but not at all. It was only when the two happened together simultaneously we were able to get complete extermination of large numbers of organisms. So I said, why don't we just adapt that same concept to destroy cancer? Because we can press glucose. It's not essential amino acid, and the liver will make a little bit of it. But when you have a lot of very little glucose coming into the body, and the liver has to make a little bit of it, and then you exercise, and the brain takes most of what's available, your cancer cell is going to be marginalized completely by this, because they are absolutely required to have glucose, whereas the brain can burn ketones, the heart can burn ketones and fatty acids. Cancer cells
ketones is connected with fats. That's
so cancer cells cannot burn fatty acids or ketone bodies. And these people who say they can do not understand or have not done the experiments like we have done. We've interrogated. I just published a paper showing how all major cancers store fatty acids and lipid droplets in the cytoplasm. Why? Because they can't burn them. And if they try to burn them, they're going to get reactive oxygen species and die. So it's a protective mechanism of the cancer cell. So it's a marker for OXPHOS inefficiency. They're storing the fatty acids because OXPHOS is inefficient. So they store the fatty acids. It's not complicated. But yet the people in the field think they're storing it for energy for the cancer cell, thinking the cancer cell can use that. They have a bad mitochondria, can't burn fatty acids. So anyway, normal cells can burn fatty acids and ketone bodies. The brain can, the heart can, cancer cells cannot. So when you lower one fuel and transition to another fuel, the normal cells get healthy and the cancer cells get marginalized. But they hang on because they're burning glutamine, but they're fermenting glutamine. So, and you're 100% right, Andrew. You can't take glutamine out of the body because our immune system needs the same molecule that the cancer cell needs. And our gut needs the glutamine, our urea cycles. Glutamine is a non-essential amino acid because we can make it, but it's essential for so many physiological processes, and it's essential for metastatic cancer. The metastatic cancer cells need glutamine because they are derived from the immune system. We have shown clearly that all major metastatic cancers share characteristics in common with macrophages, a major cell that needs glutamine. So now we have this confrontation. We have a cancer cell that absolutely needs the glutamine and the glucose. We can take away the glucose and transition the body to ketones, but that's not going to hammer the glutamine as well. So we come in with a pulsing, like 6-deoxynorleucine and different kinds of, and then we exercise like crazy, which will further lower the glucose by taking it out of the bloodstream and also reducing glutamine with exercise. And then you come in with these drugs that pulsing. It's the pulse now. The press is and the pulse is the targeted glue. But you have to do it very strategically because you need the immune system to pick up the corpses of the cancer cells that you kill. So you can't let dead cancer cells just hang around because you paralyze your immune system. So you see how nice it is? You can then pulse and press and pulse and press and slowly degrade the tumor while making the rest of the body super healthy. It's unbelievable. You just have to know how to do it. You have to know the biology and biochemistry, evolutionary biology. All of these concepts come together for the eventual long-term management and potentially resolution of cancer.
And you have this index that you use for patients to know when it's time to do the pulsing or the attacking the glutamine.
That's true. The press pulse, glucose ketone index calculator. So we published that a long time ago. Well, we published it maybe 10 years ago. And I built that because I had this friend, cancer patient from France, Trudy. She had a brain tumor. And what was happening was we were measuring, using her as kind of a guinea pig, and she was acceptable to this because she lived almost 10 years with a brain tumor, a brainstem tumor, actually. And she was telling us, so we were measuring glucose and glutamine independently of each other, and we've seen tremendous fluctuations. So she got into an argument with somebody who took her handicapped parking spot, and she got into a real anger state, and she measured her blood sugar, and she said, "Oh my God, I have 150 milligram per deciliter. My cancer is going to be growing." And I said, because she was on ketogenic metabolic therapy. And I said, what's your ketones? Oh, they're still at about 2.5 millimolar. I said, wow. So you got angry, your blood sugar went up, but your ketones did not go down. And then my students and I said, it's much easier if we make a ratio of glucose to ketones, because now if the glucose goes up and spikes, but you still have a significant amount of ketones, the spike doesn't appear to be as problematic as it would be if you were just to look at glucose by itself. So we started doing the ratio of dividing the glucose by the ketones. So you transition the glucose to the millimolar, and you divide it by ketones in millimolar, and you get a number. And we were showing that the lower that number goes, the slower the tumor grows. So the lower the glucose ketone index, the slower the tumor. And then we started doing really sophisticated quantitative analysis to show you a clear linkage between the GKI value and how slow the lower the GKI, the slower the tumor, the less inflammation, all of these kinds of things, less angiogenesis, less inflammation. We were shown this is unbelievable. So it's a quantitative measure. We were the first to publish a linkage between blood sugar and how fast tumors grow. And then people started to do it in the clinic. They were showing that brain cancer, breast cancer, colon cancer, the higher the blood sugar, the faster and more quickly the patients were dying. So clearly, we knew that if we had low GKI, these people would live a lot longer. And when they're in a low GKI, now the tumor becomes massively vulnerable to even lowest levels of drugs and procedures, because these tumor cells are not flexible. They're only dependent on fermentation. So they're nearly as adaptable as, and people in the field always say, oh no, these tumors are very adaptable. Well, everything you're doing is making glucose and glutamine abundant, and you think the tumor is adaptable when you're just giving it what it needs to survive. This is the most incredibly simple disease I have ever seen in my life, this cancer. It's not a complex. We have made it by our fumbling and bumbling and doing all the crazy stuff that we do, the wrong theory, doing all this crazy stuff. We have made this disease a frightening, mysterious problem, when in fact it's a dumb-ass metabolic problem.
Okay. So when you have the GKI index is down to, what is it, below 2 or something? We
found that.
For a period, and then you pull back and
then you come in with low doses of these parasite medications.
Yeah.
So another thing, we published something on that, membendazole, and I found out that the parasites and the cancer cells use common pathways to get energy.
They both ferment to create.
They use mitochondrial substrate level phosphorylation, which and that's another thing that our big thing. I had a speculation long ago that I think these cancer cells are fermenting inside the mitochondria, which is called mitochondrial fermentation. And, they had seen it in parasites. They had seen it. So I said, how do we know the cancer cells? So I teamed up with Christos Chronopoulos from Semmelweis University in Budapest. He's the world expert on mitochondrial substrate level phosphorylation. And at first he wasn't working in the cancer field. And I told him, I said, Christos, I think these damn cancer cells are getting energy from mitochondrial substrate level phosphorylation. So he and I started to look into it, and he would say, yeah, absolutely. So these cancer cells, the mitochondria say, mitochondria and cancer cells are functional. Yeah, they're fermenting. Just like so they take in oxygen, they make ATP, and the people who don't do a deep dive on this say, oh no, mitochondria are perfectly healthy in cancer cells. They take in oxygen and they throw out ATP. They take in oxygen, make reactive ROS, reactive oxygen species, not ATP, and they get glutamine coming in and giving the ATP through a fermentation mechanism. It's unbelievable. So once you can account now for all the things that people have misunderstood, and now we have a much more clear explanation for what's going on. So yes, press pulse metabolic therapy lowers glucose, elevates ketones, and then you come in with the pulsing of the glutamine, and this will manage long-term management. I don't know. We don't ever use the cure word because we don't know. We haven't done this long enough. We have a brain cancer guy who just passed away from a cerebral hemorrhage after a fourth debulking surgery from his first inoperable tumor. But he never died from the cancer. He died from some he was 10-year survival with a glioblastoma. But he didn't die from the glioblastoma. He died from a surgical procedure trying to remove the last residual piece of the tumor. But we're getting longer and longer survivors for these so-called terminal cancers when we can get people into nutritional ketosis. The problem is we don't have the glutamine targeting drugs that we should have. The best one that I have seen so far is 6-deoxynorleucine, which is done. And they said, oh, we can't use that. It's too toxic. Well, you didn't target glucose and you gave a buttload of it. Anything in too much of a concentration is going to be toxic. And its level of toxicity pales in comparison to Red Devil, doxorubicin, and some of the other crazy things we're given to humans. So you got to know how to use the tools. Once you know how to use the tools, this can be very manageable without toxicity. And yet we're up against, and then you go to the oncologist, they never heard, what I just told you has never been heard by any of these folks. So
it's crazy. I mean, why doesn't everybody understand this? Conventional methods, radiation, chemotherapy, surgery are firstly, they're super expensive, and they have severe side effects. So why aren't your findings hailed at every oncology clinic, and why aren't doctors shouting, hooray, we can heal people without ghastly side effects and without wasting billions of dollars?
You know why? Because they think cancer is a genetic disease. That's why. So it's the theory. It's the theory under which now don't forget.
So the map before the territory then.
Yeah, we put billions of dollars into these cancer genome atlas, and all the world top medical schools were all sequencing, looking for genes, which was taking the attention away. Very smart people doing stupid things. So you take the attention away from the real problem. But it took 10 years or 20 years to realize this is not dropping the death rate for cancer, mainly because it's not a genetic disease. It's a mitochondrial metabolic disease. So you can, and why we continue to use toxic poisons and radiation is the promise of the gene theory never came to fruition, nor will it ever come to fruition. It's not the correct theory, and any more so than was the geocentric theory able to explain the movement of planets through the solar system. That was a fail. It was Copernicus who told us, put the sun in the center of the solar system, and all these other things make sense. You put mitochondrial metabolic, the mitochondrial problem as the center of the cancer, and all this other stuff will come to pass. You can manage it very clearly. No difference between the geocentric heliocentric theory and the somatic mutation versus the mitochondrial metabolic theory.
Right. I guess there was so much, both money and intellectual property, so to speak, invested in the genetic theory that it takes a long time to realize that, maybe it wasn't that. I mean, it's like a long, slow disappointment that has to play out.
Yeah, but in the meantime, we got 1,700 people a day dying. This disappointment.
Yeah.
All right, that's the tragedy. That's the greatest tragedy in the history of medicine. We're allowing these poor folks to die in a miserable death when that does not have to happen.
Yeah. So what is it that drives cancer then? If it's not a genetic disease, what is it that drives cancer? How can we prevent it? Everyday people.
Well, it's very hard to get cancer if your mitochondria remain healthy. Okay, oxidative phosphorylation sufficiency prevents cancer. So you have to be oxidative. You have to have significant exercise, what we call leisure exercise. And this is the way our Paleolithic ancestors were all the time. To eke out an existence when you have to gather stuff and kill stuff every day, or you're always exercising. Your cells are always in a state of oxidative sufficiency. We have to recognize that many of the foods that we eat are high in glucose and poor in nutrition. They impact negatively on oxidative phosphorylation. We also have certain things in the environment that we really can't get a hold of yet, and that are these forever chemicals and microplastics. and just levels of carcinogens. We are now in society where emotional stress is significant in many of us. We have tension, we have emotional stress. We sit in traffic, we sit in front of computers, we sit looking at cell phones. We get vibes from all of this that creates stress. Poor sleep. This is another factor that will contribute to weakening oxidative phosphorylation. So all of the things that we are currently confronted with impact together many, not one thing, but all of these things in different degrees will impact negatively on the efficiency of some cells in our body to do oxidative phosphorylation, thereby leading to a compensatory fermentation, dysregulated cell growth, and cancer. And other cells will up and die, like in the brain. If we have impact negatively on mitochondria, neurons will die. Parkinson's disease, the neurons can't switch. Neurons can't switch to fermentation, so they generally die. Cardiomyocytes die in mature heart. So some organs will never get cancer because they can't do the second phase, which is to switch to fermentation. Any cell that can switch to fermentation can potentially become a neoplastic cell. But some people can tolerate that, but then they get hypertension, they get high blood pressure, they get diabetes. We have an obesity epidemic in the world. Obviously, if people knew that obesity is replacing smoking as a way to damage oxidative phosphorylation, we have everything in front of us. It's just policies by the governments, recognition, education on the part of the population and the medical establishment. We can do this. And the biggest problem, one of the largest problems, is how do you make money on this?
I was going to ask about that because there's no money to make. These will be new changing diets.
Yeah. Well, we have to figure a way to do this, and we have to replace revenue generation with alternative ways to do this. This is one of the great things about being human is we're innovative. We created this problem. We can uncreate the problem and still make money on it. I'm not one of those guys, unfortunately. I just know how to I know how to manage the problem, but I don't know how to make any money on the problem. I'm managing the problem. So I'll let that go to the entrepreneurs and those kinds. But
because we're not talking about creating new pills, new vaccines, new stuff like that. We're talking about changing lifestyle.
Yeah. Well,
where's the money? Where's the money?
But there's money in that because there's people that are now working on this MetFix, which is a branch of the former CrossFit, because CrossFit people were always quite healthy. But now it's knowing your metabolism together with your exercise. It's the education of the whole person, not just the fact that you're doing the exercise. The whole person needs to know where they fit in this modern society,
right?
What they can do about it and become educated about it, and they can put a lot of and people can make money on this. Okay, when you educate people in certain ways and produce certain products that will keep the entire body healthy, this will be a new industry. So it's coming because people want to live. They don't want to be, dying in large numbers and being suffering from all these things. But human nature is very interesting because we know that obesity and diabetes can be cured by exercise and diet. But people would rather not do exercise or change their diet, but rather take Ozempic or some pill that melts the fat off their body. The easy way. Is there another way we can do this? You can find, take this Ozempic pill. The problem is who knows what the consequences will be to the human body for 20 years. And as soon as you get off the damn pill, you get all the problems come right back in your face. Yeah. So, but people just do that. Maybe there's an easy way that you can get exercise without exercising. I don't know. It's going to be interesting, but you open these possibilities and the innovation will explode out. And there will be new industries that will spring from this. And we'll have to let the people make their own decision. But, finding forever chemicals and microplastics. These are the waste products of our industrial advance. And as I say many times, our industries have evolved so much faster than our biology. We are still Paleolithic man in a modern society because it takes eons and eons to change your biology. But our technology has advanced so rapidly within the last 100 years. It's just phenomenal. But we're still Paleolithic guys,
Yeah.
people, and now we're confronted with new risk factors in our environment, and knowing our biology effectively, evolutionary biology in particular, we can then now strategize on how to manage these risk factors and allow us to live longer and healthier.
Would you go so far as to say that we could avoid getting cancer by eating in a certain way? And would you also be able to recommend what that is that you should eat?
Well, I mean, do we want to go back to the cave? Do we want to go out every day and kill some deer? Oh, here's my neighbor's dog. Let's kill and eat it. I mean, we kill natural organisms, all organic. Now, of course, we're trying to raise organic eggs, organic chickens, organic cows, all of these things. But, for mass production of food, normally we're genetically engineering a lot of stuff, plants especially, genetically engineered plants. We're producing genetically engineered pigs and cows, and we're doing all this kind of stuff. And then we feed them all kinds of crap food to make their growth. Some of these damn chickens have been engineered. They can become a full chicken in like 6 months, and then we eat them. But and they taste delicious. I mean, most of the stuff that we're eating is very delicious as well. much tastier than the natural stuff, and then you have to pay more money for the natural. Yeah, that's another thing. So you have all of these conflicting things. It would be one thing if pizza didn't taste so good. Dunkin' Donuts and all of these delicious foods. It would be one thing if they taste so good. We evolved to want sweet. Sweet was like a prized thing in our environment because sweets would allow us to store fat. What was sweet? Fruits during seasonal periods and berries and things like this. But now we're confronted with sweets everywhere. So it's our biology that loves sweet. So the stuff that's making us sick is basically the stuff that we've always sought. And now it's done in overabundance and in the wrong context. So yeah, what do we eat? Do we really want to go back and hunt for stuff and kill animals ourselves and just eat organic stuff? I don't know. I mean, as long as we know, and then your blood, lose your GK. Look at your GKI. I think once the glucose ketone index can be incorporated into our cell phone.
Everybody has their own GKI meter.
Yes,
in their hands.
And right now we have the Free Libra blood monitor on your arm. Okay, called Free Libra. You can get real-time information on your blood sugar at all times. You can get it on your cell phone. Comes from your arm right to the phone. Once we build the glucose ketone index calculator on your arm, then you'll be able to get real-time GKI values. And we can stratify GKI into different zones. So you would have unhealthy zone, moderate zone, super healthy zone.
Okay, this week I better cut down on
and
the
then when you get down to 2.0 or below, you're in cancer killing zone.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And below 5 is cancer avoidance zone.
Yeah. 10 to 5 would be like your Paleolithic ancestor.
Yeah.
Oh, you'd be in the Paleolithic zone, which would be great for cancer prevention. But if you did get cancer, you have to go to another level.
And then
you can say, okay, party level, okay, 50 or 60. Now you're in the 50 or 60 zone, party zone. You don't want to stay in that zone too long. But the glucose ketone index calculator that we developed, and we couldn't even patent that. They said you can't patent a formula. So, and you couldn't license it to anybody because you couldn't do it. So they're putting it into all these meters now. And the people selling the meters are making a lot of money because they have it all corporate. But we don't get a nickel for anything.
Yeah, I found these devices when I Googled them.
You're right. They're using our calculator to put in the meter.
Yeah, so you're not making any money from it. But
no, nothing. All my support comes from philanthropy and private foundations. So we know that there are some people on the planet that have a lot of money, and they just want to see themselves being involved in this new transformation, healthcare, and I acknowledge them. So when you see my papers published, acknowledgments, you say, "Who the hell are all these people you got on there?" Those are the philanthropists. Those are the guys that are supporting our research. So they say, "Well, I didn't know this guy. Who's that guy? What's this guy doing?" Well, they're giving us money so we can do the research and we get it out. So we're not beholden to any major grant except for private foundations. And they want to see outcome right away. They want to see, let's drop breast cancer, let's drop colon cancer, let's drop brain cancer. And now we're starting to put it into people, and we're seeing remarkable responses on the part of people based on our preclinical studies.
That's great. What about the diet's significance for other diseases like autoimmune diseases? I saw just the other day an article at the Karolinska Institute in Stockholm. Here, they're now very excited about some kind of new vaccine that they are coming up with against autoimmune diseases, and nobody talks about the diet. Nobody talks about what people are eating, even in that area. So, what about the diet for these kinds of diseases, like SLE, psoriasis, Crohn's, MS, and all of these kinds of diseases?
Yeah, no, those are very important because a lot of those autoimmune problems have come from some unusual chemical in the environment that then launches your body to have a response. And even the ketogenic diet, some people develop an immune response to that. It's kind of like a terrible skin rash. Their body just responded very differently. That's why in the most recent paper that came out with our colleagues from Greece, where they used calorie restricted Mediterranean ketogenic diet to manage glioblastoma, getting significant a number more people surviving beyond 3 years who did the metabolic therapy than who didn't. Big difference, and that was a Mediterranean ketogenic diet. So they used sardines and salmon, olive oils, and some small amounts of plant material. And they were able to make that more compliant. Now, if someone were to develop a reaction to sardines or salmon, we would have to modify the diet to get away from those potential sources that would lead to an autoimmune response. So I think the diet can be strategic in addressing autoimmunity if it were to flare up in someone based on the kind of what they were eating. And that doesn't take away a vaccine either. I mean, if you have a vaccine or a therapy that could remove the autoimmune reaction, for sure, that would be a facilitatory. We don't like to throw out any novel advances in our understanding of disease that might be very helpful for certain people. We don't even want to throw out radiation and chemo for cancer, as long as they know when and how to use it so it doesn't cause toxicity. So it's just a re-education and knowledge of the tools that you have available for managing. Just knowing how to use the tools you have in a better way can make an enormous difference on the outcome of managing these different diseases. And I think that's the flexibility that we as humans have. We can adapt. We should be able to adapt our procedures in recognition of therapeutic success, rather than writing stuff in granite, like the standards of care for cancer seems to be written in granite, because what you guys are doing in Stockholm is the same we're doing here in Boston and New York City and Texas and China and India. They're all using the same crazy stuff. They don't seem to have any level of adaptability when something new comes along. And that's what's weird. That has to change significantly.
So does your team at Boston College enroll people for new studies continuously? Or do you conduct clinical therapy?
No, we don't even have a medical school here. We're not even a medical school. You don't need to have a medical school. You just have to know biology. That's the bottom line. It's a biological problem. It's not a medical problem. You made it a medical problem by surgically mutilating people, chopping out pieces of chunks of tissue. Now, the thing of it is that if you can shrink the tumor away, you don't need to be surgically. If you can shrink it down so it's small and indolent, then yes, you would need to contract out to a hospital to have it finally removed. But to understand the biology and the biochemistry of the problem, you don't need to be at a medical school. So that's what we're showing clearly at Boston College. We do not have a medical school.
No, but you conduct studies and you enroll
with my physician colleagues in hospitals. So they have a license to do that. We are not licensed to treat patients.
I see.
So, but we have the knowledge to tell physicians what their strategies could be. So, and that's the way we work. And then my colleagues who are MDs in medical schools start treating cases of people here and there, and we publish these remarkable observations. And but you can't do at this time a large clinical trial because each person is a separate, unique metabolic entity. What works for this guy may not work exactly. So you can't use one shoe fits the whole group, one size fits all. You have to be aware of the unique individual metabolic condition of each person. So you can't run out and start treating thousands of people because we simply do not know enough about individual variation in biology and biochemistry to say that one size of metabolic therapy will work against all these people. So right now we're taking small groups of people and we're trying to ferret out minor differences. Why does this guy respond so much better than the other guy? What could underlie that? So it's a work in progress. But a lot of people want to do it because they feel that they're charge of their destiny and they do it themselves. They just need some guidance. And that's what we're doing. We're trying to provide guidance, but you can do that over Zoom, and you have to be licensed to do that. You have to have a medical degree or some degree to say that the education or the information you're giving to that patient is supported by having some certification. I'm not certified to treat anybody, or in any way. So all I can do is send out educational information for the patients to read, review this information with their oncologists, and come to a team effort on how you're best going to manage this individual. The problem is the people hear what I say, they read this, they go to the oncology, and the oncology guy says, I never heard of this, it can't be any good, it must be quackery. But what he's doing is quackery. So, and he doesn't know it, but it's true. When you see bald-headed people who have been treated for cancer, you're trying to kill cancer cells. Why the hell are you going bald? Metabolic therapy kills cancer cells and keeps your hair. So this tells you right off the bat when you see people that are brutalized by a system, they're being treated by people who don't know the biology and biochemistry of what they're doing. And that's because of the establishment. The system itself thinks cancer is a genetic disease, so you're not training these people to think that it's a metabolic problem. It's a mitochondrial metabolic disease. That's what it is. So
we're so happy that you're doing this research, that you're conveying these findings to the world. So where can people go now if they want to know more about this, about your work? Where should
all of our papers are published open access on this subject. So it's there. It's out in the public. It's anybody who has a computer and go Google. Our big paper on managing glioblastoma just came out not long ago.
You mentioned that. Tell us about the results from that one.
Well, that's a protocol treatment by Dr. Thomas Seyfried, who's working in my lab. He's an MD, PhD. He understands the biology and biochemistry. And then we had a lot of dietitians, other clinicians, MDs and PhDs on this paper. People who want to get involved and start implementing these strategies in their clinics, in their hospitals. But again, you run into a significant resistance, even with knowledgeable people that are licensed to do this. Institutional review boards in the hospitals themselves are often very antagonistic to doing these procedures in lieu of standard of care. So they say, oh, we'll do standard of care, radiation and chemo and all this stuff. And then if the patient doesn't respond, maybe we can think about bringing in some metabolic therapy, the hospital will say. But as I said, for glioblastoma, which is a deadly brain cancer, they don't want to do metabolic therapy or ketogenic metabolic therapy until they realize that the standard of care doesn't work. Well, the standard of care rarely works. So what the hell are you guys doing? Bring in the metabolic therapy up front. If metabolic therapy doesn't work, you can always do a little radiation, some of that other stuff.
Exactly. That's the order to do it.
They got it back-ass forward. They're not doing it in the right way. But I don't think it's because they lack knowledge. I think it's because the system It's a revenue generating system, this cancer. You got to be able to generate revenue. And if you don't generate revenue, people get really pissed off. So what's more important, revenue generation or patient outcome? And of course, it's revenue generation, number one, patient outcome, number two. That's the reality of the world. Get over it.
Well, let's cross our fingers that your findings will soon find their way out into the world, into the mainstream. And
well, they will. It's absolutely guaranteed it will be there, because we can't continue to do what we're doing. It's
right.
just logical. You just cannot any longer pursue this path. It's not working for the majority of people. So you have to change.
It has to change. Professor Thomas Seyfried, thank you so much for being a guest on Mind the Shift. Good luck now.
Thank you.
If you like this video, don't forget to subscribe and don't forget to hit that like button and share the video with your friends. Please support the channel if you can. I appreciate all the support. You can become a Patreon for as little as $1 a month, or you can make a one-off donation via PayPal if you wish. All the links are in the description box below. Thank you.